If you weren't searching but suddenly came across me right now, it means you are in desperate need of these things. I know you have been through a hard and arduous journey in life. I know you desire a comfortable life, abundant money, and to be loved by everyone. But life is full of disappointments. From childhood, you weren't as lucky as your peers. Growing up, you suffered the pressures of work. There were times you found love, thinking it was an escape from the pain, but ultimately, marriage brought arguments and emotional distress. When you get older, things settle down a bit, and you think you can live out the rest of your years in peace, but then illness strikes. The physical decline makes it impossible to live alone, yet you can't stand living with your children, let alone the superficial fake care of a nursing home. I know there are many videos offering life advice like this all over YouTube. I'm not saying those videos are bad, but they are just temporary painkillers, delaying the accumulated pain until it reaches a breaking point. You know that you can't just eat beef, eggs, and vegetables to be healthy and live long because you already eat them every day. You know you should keep a positive mindset, but alas, a negative, depressive episode can suddenly appear at any time, dragging you into inescapable sadness. You have no idea that living a long life is also a torture if you don't know what I am about to share in the next 10 minutes. My name is Emma, and I am 100 years old. As I got older, my loved ones left one by one, parents, friends, and then my soulmate passed away. He was diagnosed at 78. He passed at 81. And I want to be honest with you because I think too many people soften this part. His death broke something in me, not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, the way a crack spreads through old plaster. I kept functioning. I kept getting up in the morning. I was hollowed out. I was a person going through the motions of a life that no longer felt like mine. Not a single call, not a single word of concern. I stayed in the house longer than I should have because the house was the last place where I still felt like myself, like Emma, a person with a history and a story, not just an old woman who needed things, but the body has its own timeline, and mine was not cooperating with my pride. I was forgetting things, small things at first, where I'd put my keys, whether I'd taken my medication, what day of the week it was, then bigger things. I'd turn the stove on and walk away and forget it was on. I'd start a sentence and lose the end of it mid-thought. Cooking, which I had always loved, became exhausting and frightening. Cleaning the house felt like a mountain I could no longer climb. I had a faucet that dripped for 6 months because I couldn't figure out how to fix it and couldn't bring myself to ask for help. I tried having people come in to assist, helpers, aides, that sort of arrangement. Some of them were kind, some of them were not. All of them rearranged my kitchen. I know that sounds petty, but when your world has shrunk down to one house and your own 2 hands and whatever you can still do for yourself, having someone move your dishes to different cabinets feels like a small erasure of who you are. And it was expensive, and they kept leaving. New jobs, better opportunities, life happening. And each time one left, I had to start over, train someone new, explain my preferences again, let another stranger into my home and hope this one would stay. Eventually, I moved in with my daughter. She was generous to offer, and I was grateful, and I lasted 4 months before I could see, in her face, in the way her husband went quiet at dinner, in the way the grandchildren tiptoed around me, that my being there was making everyone tense. I was not adding to their household. I was something they were accommodating. and I would rather have died alone than be accommodated by my own family. I went back to my house and then eventually to a nursing home. I will not be unkind about the nursing home. The people there were doing their jobs, but I want you to understand what it feels like to live somewhere that runs on a schedule that has nothing to do with you, where you eat at a certain time, not because you are hungry, but because it is mealtime, where you sleep when the lights go out and wake when they come back on, where every day is structured around institutional efficiency rather than the actual rhythms of a human being's life. I felt like a plant that had been uprooted from its soil and placed in a container, still technically alive, but no longer really growing. I went back home again. Of course I did. The house was falling apart around me, and I was falling apart inside it, and neither of us had the energy to do much about it. I was 89 years old, and I was genuinely beginning to wonder why I was still here, not in a dramatic way, just in a quiet, tired way, like a candle that has been burning a very long time and is beginning to gutter, and then I fell. It happened in the kitchen on a Tuesday morning in November. I don't even know exactly what happened. One moment I was reaching for something on the counter, and the next moment I was on the floor and I could not get up. I lay there for several hours. I wasn't unconscious. I was aware the entire time. I just could not get up. And I had time, lying there on that kitchen floor, to think about my life, to look back across all those decades and to feel, I will be honest with you, a profound and terrible sadness. Not fear, not pain, just sadness. The kind that comes when you realize you have reached the end of something. My neighbor found me. She had come to return a dish and seen the light on and knocked, and when I didn't answer, she got worried and came around to the back. She called an ambulance. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital and then came home, and I lay in my bed and I thought, this is it. This is where I stop. I did not want to stop, but I did not know how to keep going. There is a difference between those two things, and I lived in that difference for a long time. I need to tell you what happened next very carefully because I know how it sounds, and I know that some of you will be skeptical, and I want you to stay with me anyway. About 3 weeks after I came home from the hospital, I was still mostly in bed, still moving slowly, still feeling like the world had gone grey at the edges. There was a knock at my door. I almost didn't answer it. I had to get myself up and shuffle to the front of the house, and I was annoyed, honestly, because I was tired and I wasn't expecting anyone, but I answered it. Standing on my porch was a woman about my age. She was 90, she told me later, but she did not look 90. She looked, and I mean this sincerely, not as a rhetorical device, she looked radiant. That is the only word for it. Her skin was rosy, her eyes were clear and bright, and she stood straight and easy in a way that I, who had once been strong and capable, could no longer manage. She was carrying a small pamphlet. She told me her name. She said she had something she wanted to share with me. She placed the pamphlet in my hand and told me it was about a practice called Falun Dafa. She said it had changed her life. She said it might change mine. Now, I have to be transparent with you. My first instinct was to close the door. I was not in the mood. I was exhausted and grieving and deeply, profoundly not interested in any kind of sales pitch, spiritual or otherwise. I had heard plenty of pitches over 90 years. I had no energy left for hope that didn't pan out. But I didn't close the door, and I have thought about that moment many times since, wondering what made me stop. I think it was her eyes. There was something in them, a quality of genuine peace, not performed happiness, not the cheerful mask that people put on when they want you to feel better, but actual, settled, quiet peace, the kind that comes from somewhere real. I had not seen that in a long time. I had forgotten it was something a person could have. I took the pamphlet. She left. I went back to my bed, and eventually I read it. I want to be very clear about what happened next, because I think honesty is the only thing I have left that is worth giving to anyone. I did not have an overnight transformation. I did not wake up the next morning healed and happy and full of energy. That is not what happened. What happened is slower and I think more trustworthy than that. I got the book. Juan Falun it is called, the main text of Falun Dafa. I read it. I did not understand all of it. Some of it confused me. Some of it challenged ideas I had held for decades about how the world works and what matters and why we are here. But I kept reading because something in it resonated with something in me, something I hadn't heard articulated that clearly before, even after 90 years of looking. The practice is built on 3 principles: truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. And I know that sounds simple. I know it sounds like the kind of thing you'd put on a motivational poster and forget about. But when you sit with those 3 words, really sit with them, and you start to ask yourself honestly how much of your life has actually reflected those qualities, it is not simple. It is one of the most demanding and clarifying things I have ever done. I also learned the exercises, 5 of them, gentle and deliberate, rooted in the Qigong tradition. I am not going to pretend I was graceful at first. I was 90 years old, and I had spent the last several years barely able to move without pain, but I practiced. Every day I practiced. In my living room, slowly, carefully, learning the movements and the breathing, and gradually, things changed. The pain in my joints, which had been my constant companion for over a decade, began to ease. My sleep improved. My mind felt cleaner, clearer, less foggy. I started getting up in the mornings not out of obligation, but because I actually wanted to get up. I planted a small garden. I started cooking again, real cooking, the kind that takes time and care, because I had time and I wanted to use it well. My children noticed. That was actually one of the first external confirmations that something real was happening. My daughter called one Sunday morning and said, "Mom, you sound different." She couldn't quite put her finger on what was different, just different, lighter, she said. They started visiting more, not out of obligation, not with that pinched, worried look that had become so familiar. They came because they genuinely wanted to spend time with me, because I had apparently become interesting again. My grandchildren, who had been politely distant in the way that young people sometimes are around very old relatives, started asking me questions, real questions, about my life, about what I had learned, about how I was living. We would sit on the back porch after dinner and talk for hours. I am not sure I can explain to you in any kind of scientific or quantifiable way exactly what Falun Dafa has done for me physically. I know what my body feels like now at 100 compared to what it felt like at 89, and I know the difference is real. I know that I do not feel like a person waiting to die. I feel like a person who is living, and at 100 years old on this particular day, talking to you, I think that is one of the most remarkable and unexpected gifts I have ever received. But I want to tell you something beyond the physical, because I think the physical is actually the smaller part of the story. What Falun Dafa gave me, what the teachings gave me, what the practice gave me, was a framework for understanding my life that actually made sense to me. Not in a way that required me to pretend the hard parts didn't happen, or that the grief wasn't real, or that the loneliness wasn't devastating, but in a way that allowed me to look at all of it, the depression childhood, the difficult marriage, the loss, the years on the floor of my own life, and understand it as part of something rather than just a series of random, painful events happening to a person who had no idea why. I let go of a great deal of anger. I had not realized how much I was carrying until I began to put it down. Anger at my parents for the coldness of my childhood. Anger at Robert, God rest him, for leaving me. Anger at my children for not being able to fix what couldn't be fixed. Anger at my body for aging. Anger at the world for being difficult and unkind and so full of suffering. I had been carrying that for decades, quietly, under everything, and it was extraordinarily heavy. Putting it down was not easy. It happened slowly, over months and years of reading and practicing, and this sounds unusual, but I'll say it, of genuinely trying to live by those 3 principles every single day. Truthfulness means I stopped telling everyone I was fine when I wasn't. Compassion means I extended to myself some of the same patience I had always tried to extend to others. Forbearance means I stopped fighting the things I could not change and started putting my energy into the things I could. I walk around my town now, and I'm aware that I am an unusual sight, a 100-year-old woman moving with more ease than most people half my age, stopping to talk to strangers, genuinely curious about their lives. People ask me my secrets sometimes when they learn my age. I tell them. Some of them look at me like I'm slightly strange, and I don't mind. Some of them, the ones whose eyes have that particular quality of quiet desperation, the ones who are suffering in a way they haven't yet told anyone, those ones lean in a little closer, and I tell them more. I am not here to tell you that Falun Dafa will solve all your problems. I am not here to promise you anything. I am 100 years old, and I have been alive long enough to be deeply suspicious of anyone who promises anything. What I can tell you is what it did for me. What I can tell you is that this practice is free. The books are free. The exercises are free. There are no fees, no requirements, no membership, nothing to buy. What I can tell you is that I came to it at 90 years old, lying in bed after a fall, convinced that I had nothing left and that I was wrong. I had more left than I could have imagined. I am still here. I am lucid. I am joyful in a way that is not performed or artificial or the result of pharmaceutical intervention. I am genuinely, quietly, deeply joyful. And I spent enough years without that feeling to understand exactly how extraordinary it is. If you have found this video and something in what I'm saying sounds familiar to you, if you recognize the particular weight I've been describing, the exhaustion, the grief, the sense of moving through a life that has somehow stopped belonging to you, then I want you to know this: I see you. I know what that feels like from the inside, and I am here at 100 years old as living proof that it does not have to be the end of the story. Look up Falun Dafa, read the book. It is free, right there on the internet, available in your language. Try the exercises, give it time, give yourself time. You have more time than you think. I know because I am 100 years old and I have never felt more alive than I do right now.